The biggest thing I can think of is, especially if you weren't the person who handled the money while you were married, get help. There are lots of people out there. There are lots of financial advisors. There's a right one for you who will work with you the way you want to. So make sure, sometimes people will come to me and they'll say, I met with someone and they wouldn't answer my questions. They only gave me one option. I felt really uncomfortable. If you find yourself in that space, don't work with that person. You're under no obligation. Find someone you really feel is going to be a partner with you, because usually after divorce, we're rebuilding stuff, right?
Yeah.
We're figuring out how to do it alone. We split our assets probably in half. You might be in a new job situation. Like, new planning needs to take place because your life changed. So just find good partners who are going to help you get good information and do the best thing for you.
Welcome to Single Parent Success Stories, a podcast designed to inspire single parents. Here you'll find resources from self-care to finances to parenting and everything in between. Discover what it takes to thrive. Let the stories inspire you to what is possible. Hello and welcome to Single Parent Success Stories. Today we have a special guest, Brenda Bridges, joining us from Chattanooga, Tennessee. She is a financial advisor, mediator, certified divorce financial analyst, and a certified divorce coach. She blends personal stories with professional insights. Her journey through realms of transition, incorporating lessons from financial planning, empathetic divorce mediation, and also sharing pretty big mistakes that you can learn from rather than making yourself. And the topic of today's discussion is a financial to-do list after divorce. I think many times we think once divorce papers are finalized, off to go, we are ready to embark on a new adventure. However, there is some things that we are probably not thinking about right now. So welcome, Brenda. It is a pleasure to have you.
It is a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. I've got to say, I don't think my name has ever sounded so good as when you say it.
Thank you.
I'm like, oh, I like that. So yes, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
So please first of all share with us who you are, your story in your own words. Who is Brenda, and how did you arrive at this wonderful topic of being
Yeah.
certified financial analyst?
It's been a windy road to get here, but it all makes sense in the end. I ended up doing what I do because, let's see, it was in 2013. I was teaching yoga. I had 3 teenagers. I was, busy being a mom and volunteering and getting them to the places they needed to be. And my husband was the breadwinner. He lost his job. And I looked around and went, rightly or wrongly, yoga is not going to put my kids through college. Yoga has no benefits. I need to do something else. So I became a financial advisor, which was kind of a big switch, as one might think. But my financial advisor had been for years and years and years saying, oh, you should do this. You would be great at this. So rather than go back to my old career, which was marketing, I thought I will try something new. Um, Became a financial advisor. About a year and a half later, my husband was still not working. And he came home one morning and pretty much said he wanted a divorce. Um, yeah, I was sitting at the kitchen table and, doing a little work before I went to work. And he came in with his big old venti Starbucks and leaned up against the counter and said, I was going to write you a letter, but I figured I ought to tell you in person. There's no glue. I'm not doing therapy. It doesn't work. I want out. And then he told me to go off to work. So that started me down the path of divorce. And our divorce was very expensive. It was very acrimonious. It started out amicable and then it just devolved as the process got more complicated and went on and on. And then at the end of that, there were still a lot of mistakes made, especially financial mistakes. So I took what I had learned about finances, because finances, as I was doing them then, like retirement planning, is so very different than divorce finances. So I became a divorce financial analyst. And then as I did that for a while, I realized that, well, the numbers are important. It was really missing a lot of the empathy, emotion, compassion that you need to work through in order to make good financial decisions. So then I became a divorce coach to kind of complement the financial part, and then a mediator. And that is what I do now. I help people, primarily I help people divorce out of court. So we do out of court mediation, but we do it in a way that's very informed, because we are going through all of their finances, making sure that they both understand what they're agreeing to as they go through this mediation, and they know what the end result is going to be. What are the tax ramifications? What if you need liquidity? Are you going to be able to meet your budget? So we work through all of that detail as they go through the process. That's kind of my story in a nutshell.
Awesome, awesome. It's like your personal need rather than kind of brought you into this career
Absolutely.
opportunity. And
Yeah, my thought really was, if I can help anyone not go through what I went through and not have the mistakes made that were very expensive mistakes, then that's what I want to do. So that's how I spend my days.
awesome.
Mhm.
What some of the things kind of like we said, financial to-do list. What are some of surprises people face after the divorce papers are signed?
I mean, some are big ones and some are small ones. And as you said at the beginning, I think people look at divorce as like, okay, that's the end. I'm done. I don't have to do anything else. Yay. And really, it's just the beginning. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you need to take care of after the divorce is final. And there are things that you need to look at in your divorce decree to make sure that you're able to do these things financially when the divorce is final. We were talking a little bit earlier. I got a call this morning from a woman who her divorce is final, but a lot of the things that were written in the divorce papers aren't protecting her, or they weren't detailed. So in her particular case, they still have a joint credit card that her ex-husband is still charging things on, and it's linked to her bank account. And because he's the primary user on the card, the bank won't close the card. So she's caught in this weird circle of him charging things. Even after they're divorced, she's paying for them and she can't get the bank to stop the credit card. So she's either going to have to resort to legal action or pay it off and close it herself. I mean, it just gets to be
You
this
can
kind of
stop
road.
the payments from the, like, say they were fraudulent or
Not when
something.
there's a balance on the card, because they weren't fraudulent. He made them and they're joint on the card. But those are the kind of things that as soon as your divorce is done, you want to make sure you're taking care of those kind of things. And she's been divorced for a while now, and this just keeps going on and on and on. So it's figuring out things like that. So I would say some of the things are really obvious and others not so much. So first thing is beneficiaries. You've got a beneficiary on every financial account that you have. Now, in some states, it says kind of de facto in the divorce decree that your ex-spouse is no longer the beneficiary, but in others, it doesn't. So there have been cases where someone forgets to change the beneficiary. They might even remarry, and their old spouse receives a death benefit if they pass away. So that's not a good, I mean, that's a good surprise to have if you're getting it, but it's not a good surprise if you're the one who forgot to make that change. So beneficiaries is a big one. With that, so say someone makes their sister their beneficiary because their kids are minors. They don't want the Maybe they don't trust their ex and they don't want them to be in control of this money for their kids. So they might name someone else, a friend, another relative, because maybe the kids are 5 and 7. They're little, they can't have the money yet. Unless it's specifically written how that money should be used for the kids, that person who receives it can use it however they want. So I actually did hear a story of this exact thing happening, and the person who received it, who was supposed to use the money to take care of the kids, bought a second home because they got a big lump sum. And there was nothing in the law that said they couldn't do it. They got the money. The kids then didn't have the money. I actually had a case. She was a teenage girl who her aunt got the money when her mother died from a life insurance policy, and that aunt spent all the money. So what should have put her through college wasn't available to her because it was all spent. So things like that you want to think through from a beneficiary point of view. Is it your kids? Where is your money going if you pass away? Because you probably don't want it to go to your ex-spouse. But also, if you have minor kids, what do you want to put in place so that they're protected and the money actually goes to them? So then you're going to look at redoing your will, redoing a trust, so that you're keeping things out of probate if anything happens to you. You're letting your wishes be known of what that money should be used for. It could be funding college, it could be starting a business, whatever it is, you're making your wishes known. So beneficiaries, will and trust. Do a credit pool. So get your credit report after your divorce is final, and just kind of go through it and make a checklist. Make sure there aren't any old outstanding joint accounts you might have forgotten about or might still be open, might still be, like the woman this morning, might still be available to the spouse. So go through that and clean up your credit report afterwards to make sure there aren't any surprises or loose ends. Another really interesting thing to look at post-divorce is every state has like an unclaimed money department. Reach out to that because there could be unclaimed funds that are individual and or in both of your names. So you want to get that cleaned up so it's not just sitting there. I actually did it recently, and I've been divorced for a while now, and found a new joint account that hadn't been shut down. So it was a credit. So we need to clear that out. What are some other things to take care of? Oh, personally, you probably want to make sure that you have a power of attorney for your health and for your finances. So in case you're not able to make your own health decisions or you're not able to make your own financial decisions, who's going to do that for you? Before, when you were married, it would have been your spouse. Now you're not married. Do you want to name a person and make sure they have that paperwork so that if there is a circumstance where you're in the hospital and they need people to make decisions, they've got it at the ready and it's done correctly? So how's that for a starter list of things to do?
Yeah. What about, how you call it, your electric bills and your kind of
Yeah,
water and so on?
all of that. So often in a divorce, there's a quitclaim deed. So if you were both on the house, one party signs it over so they're no longer on the house, and whoever received the marital home is the only person on a deed. So that can be definitely something you want to follow up on. All of the utilities. Sometimes people don't even understand or know what they are. So you need to get a list of those, and you want to make sure you've got extra copies of your divorce decree, because you never know when someone is going to say, I want to see that in order to make this change. So they might want proof that you actually are divorced and that it's allowed by the divorce. If any accounts are changing hands, so if it is a retirement account and someone is receiving part of the other person's account in the divorce, I've run into people who don't make that change for years. And that's really, I would say, scary because basically it's usually a pretty large sum of money in the retirement account and no one's watching over it. Or if the money isn't pulled out and separated into a new account, so you would have the payee if it's a pension, and then the new account would be an alternate payee, where they're taking both of those accounts and they're splitting it. But you have to take action. It's a qualified domestic relations order or a domestic relations order, depending on the nature of the account. But that needs to be filed in order for the account to be split. If you never file it, the account is never split. So the person who was supposed to receive it as part of the divorce doesn't get that money unless they follow up on it. So that's an important thing to do as soon as possible after the divorce is final. Sometimes those are called a quadro. Sometimes those can take months or up to a year. They can take a long time to get moved. We just saw, I don't know when this is going to broadcast or when this is going to be shared, but yesterday we had a big dip in the markets. If you leave your share of a retirement account with your ex-spouse and something happens, good or bad, in the market, it can really impact you and you don't have any control over it. So getting those accounts separated and moved into your own name, that's also really important. And understanding the type of account it's going into. You can separate a 401k if the plan will let you and leave it in a 401k at that same account. That gives you certain benefits in accessing the money without paying. If you take retirement money out, there's a 10% penalty. If you take retirement money out of a 401k after a divorce, it's waived. But you have to look at the specifics of the plan to see details like, are you able to do it more than once or does it have to be one time? Is there a time limit on the plan in which, you have to do it within 6 months, or can it be 3 years down the line to save that 10%? If you got $100,000 in that retirement account, that's $10,000 that you're gaining by doing it correctly. If you take that same account and you put it in an IRA, you no longer get the 10% as a triggering event. So if you then take the money out of the IRA early, you're going to pay it. So you want to know not only what moves you need to make to get, just think of it this way, to get everything in your name. And you want to know what happens when you do that. What are the pros and cons of the different moves that you can make? Make sense?
Yeah, that's a lot to take.
It's a lot. Like I start talking, I think, oh my gosh, people's eyes are going to glaze over. But I think the simple way to look at it is, if it is in your life now, make sure it's in your name. Don't leave things in your ex's name because you're giving up your power. You're giving up your decision-making ability. Potentially, you're giving up money. If let's just say you make it $100,000 to make it easy in an account, but you go, oh yeah, I'm not going to move that, but it says $100,000 and you just let it sit there for years and the market went way up, maybe that 100,000 has gained $50,000 over a few years and it's 150,000 now. You didn't move it, you don't get the gain. You still only get $100,000. So not finishing things like that can be really expensive mistakes where you're leaving money on the table. Now, if your divorce decree was written so you got the gain, then you're covered, but a lot of them aren't. So it's another reason, as you're going through the divorce, it's a reason to have a financial advisor who knows divorce finances, look at your decree and make sure that you're covered. So things like that credit card story from this morning don't happen. If it was written in correctly into her decree, she would be covered and she could go to the bank and say, look, I'm not liable for this debt. It says so, a judge has blessed it. So she would stand more of a chance of not being in this really sticky situation.
Yeah. So how would you say is to best prepare for when you're going through divorce, having all this knowledge kind of, and I guess
I know they do kind of financial analysis and they
Mhm.
evaluate basically both of people's assets, the liabilities, as well as assets, and
Right,
kind of zooming in, I guess, and making a detailed look, not just looking at how much balance you have, but also looking
right.
at, like you said, who is the beneficiary, and
Mhm.
all those little what
Whose
was it?
names on the different things.
Yeah, and the
I
10%
think,
trigger you mentioned for the IRA.
yes, if you take the money out before you're 59 and a half, then you'll get dinged by the IRS. So you'll get penalized for it. But if you know you're going to need that money, then you can work with it's a CDFA, a Certified Divorce Financial Analyst, to figure out how it can best be shaped to suit your needs. Taxes are another thing. Typically, what I see is when attorneys are looking at settlements, they say basically kick the can down the road, move it down the road, don't pay the taxes now. But there could be a lot of occasions when it makes more sense to pay the taxes now. So you might want money that is not in a retirement account. You might prefer money that was in a brokerage account for your settlement. So you're going to pay a 15% capital gains tax instead of a 30% or 28% income tax. So it's looking at for the settlement part of it, is looking at the details of how you need to use that money, if you need to access it and when. And then what's the smartest way that's going to cost you the least amount of money to do that. And then after the divorce, doing everything that was on the list. So whatever your settlement was, make sure everything that should be yours moves into your name. And then make sure that you have a backup plan if something happens to you, for you to be taken care of, and for, if you have kids, for them to be taken care of. So I would say, I mean, they're big buckets, but those are the overall things. When you went through your divorce, when you go through your divorce, you make an entire list of all the things you have. So use that as a checklist. And when you're done, if it's in, if you've got, like, this is your list and you've got all of your accounts, if they're joint, make sure that all the joint ones are gone. If they're joint and the other party wants to keep them, make sure your name is off of it so you're not liable for any of the expenditures that they might make. If there's outstanding paperwork, it's not fun, but getting it done will protect you. And it could end up saving you an awful lot of money.
In cases when there was no, let's say, joint accounts, then it just comes to then the retirement stuff, right? What majority of the time. And I guess the house where you two are living or used to live,
Right.
and retirements.
Those tend to be the big things.
Are those the two, or am I missing something?
Well, those are usually the two biggest things. People might have joint checking accounts and savings accounts and brokerage accounts, or collectibles. Sometimes there's art. Anything that can be sold for a cash value, you got to decide who gets it and then make sure the title goes with it for who owns it. And sometimes people make agreements that just can't be done. They agree that one person is going to stay in the house, but the other person wants their name off the mortgage. Well, we all know mortgage rates have gone way up in the past year. The person staying in the house might not be able to get a mortgage and afford a mortgage. And very rarely, I've only known it to happen once, will a mortgage company let someone keep the same mortgage and take a person off of it. Usually they make you get a new mortgage. So as you're deciding all this stuff, you have to figure out, can it really be done? What you agreed to. Same thing will happen with executive benefit plans. So
What are
not a
those?
normal,
What
so
is
not a
an
normal 401k, but it's going to be like if someone is higher up in their company, they might have benefits in the company like stock options or restricted stock units, or a pension that's not a normal pension, it's only for the executives. Those all can have different rules. So you might look at it and say, I'm just going to keep using $100,000 because it's easy. Someone might look at it and say, oh, that's worth $100,000. We're going to split it. So you get 50,000. But if they don't let you split it, you don't get 50,000. So you have to make sure what you want, what you're agreeing to can actually be done, can be split that way. So can a mortgage be moved? Can the person afford the house? Can a pension be split? So you need to know that before the divorce is final, because once it's final, if it can't be done, you might be out of luck. And then as soon as the divorce is final, you need to do the thing to get it in your name, or in some cases, get it out of your name so you're not liable for it. So oftentimes people just don't get around to it.
Yeah.
And then there's a big risk.
Yeah. Yeah. What
Mhm.
happens when I call it, when let's say spouses decide to make accommodations in terms of paying the mortgage
Mhm.
because don't want to deal with the splitting up of the mortgage and also the accounts, the way accounts were set up. And the other person, let's say, ends up paying the taxes on the property. So one
Mhm.
is paying the mortgage payments and somebody else is paying the taxes. And then I guess in the end of the day, when everything is settled, does that go into consideration, the fact that
Only if it's written that way in your agreement. So people can be surprised at that too. And there can be tax rules. So sometimes people will say, we still have kids at home. You stay in that house for 5 years. And at the end of 5 years, we're going to sell it. And then we're just going to split whatever was made on it. Or you have a predetermined amount that each party is going to get. If the one owner wasn't living in the house in those 5 years at all, then there could be tax ramifications for them that they didn't count on. You could also have capital gains on the sale of a tax if you made a lot of money, or excuse me, the sale of a house. If you made a lot of money, the housing market has gone way up. If you sell it and have a big gain and you're no longer married, your gain is only $250,000 instead of $500,000, your deduction that you don't have to pay taxes on. So all that comes into play. So I'd say you want good professionals on your side. It's worth it. So you want a financial advisor who knows what they're doing. You want a tax person who can give you good advice. So you're not getting surprised in a year or 5 years by a giant tax bill that you hadn't counted on or wasn't part of your agreement and you don't know what to do with it.
thank you. So how does one pick a great certified financial analyst?
So
Divorce financial analyst.
we're listed, it's IDFA is the organization that charters us where we get our credentials. And they have a list. You can find them in the directory in your state. As long as we're licensed in a state, we can work in states where we don't live. So that's a little bit different than attorneys. I've worked with clients throughout the country. So I just need to make sure that my licensing is correct in the state that they live in. So that's a really good way to find people. Another way is if you're working with an attorney who works with CDFAs, you can ask the attorney who they like to partner with. And then you also find out if they will work with a CDFA. Some attorneys love us and others not so much. Some would prefer just to work solo. So if you want a CDFA on your team, then work with an attorney who's open to that, or find an attorney who's open to that. And then afterwards, most people switch financial advisors, at least one party after the divorce is final. So find a financial advisor that you're comfortable with, who answers your questions, who listens to you, who takes the time to explain things without using a bunch of terms like, we like all the acronyms and speak our own language sometimes. Like, no. Can you just explain in real terms what it means? And if you find someone who helps you do that, they're also going to help you make sure, like the list, the beneficiaries are changed, that the accounts are named correctly, that if money is transferred, the paperwork is done for the transfer. Because that takes a certain degree of cooperation. That was hard to say. After the divorce, you need signatures from your ex sometimes in order to move money into your new account. You want to have time limits on that. And in my own divorce, there was one set of papers that took 6 months before my ex would sign it. It just wasn't important to him. But there was no deadline written in my divorce decree. Get deadlines in there. So all this stuff isn't loose and hanging around for months or years down the road.
Mhm. All right. Awesome. Thank you. Is there anything I haven't asked that you would like to share?
No, I think the biggest thing I can think of is, especially if you weren't the person who handled the money while you were married, get help. There are lots of people out there. There are lots of financial advisors. There's a right one for you who will work with you the way you want to. So make sure, sometimes people will come to me and they'll say, I met with someone and they wouldn't answer my questions. They only gave me one option. I felt really uncomfortable. If you find yourself in that space, don't work with that person. You're under no obligation. Find someone you really feel is going to be a partner with you, because usually after divorce, we're rebuilding stuff, right?
Yeah.
We're figuring out how to do it alone. We split our assets probably in half. You might be in a new job situation, like new planning needs to take place because your life changed. So just find good partners who are going to help you get good information and do the best thing for you.
Yeah, you're so right. Gotta listen. If our needs are not met, we gotta find somebody else.
Yeah, yeah. And there's no shame in not knowing.
Mhm.
If you never did this before, why would you be an expert in it? So
Yeah.
don't feel bad if you have lots of questions. I mean, you're doing this podcast to help people and get them the information they need because they haven't done this before. Might not have been in the situation where you've been a single parent before. Now you got to figure all that stuff out. Get help.
Yeah, totally. I think we are fooled by the fact how easy it is to get married. You just go sign the certificate and there you
And it's
go.
all
You're married. And you think that getting divorced is just the same.
it
And
is
then
not.
you open this like big surprise.
No,
With
it's
everything.
overwhelming. It's overwhelming.
Yes. And
And
especially let's say if you've been together for a long time.
yeah,
If it was maybe you were together for a year, you don't have anything together, you don't have kids, you don't have property, then it's easy.
right.
After you have been a certain way for a long time and suddenly you have this sprung up on you, you gotta figure out a new way of being and feeling. And
Mm-hmm.
there are so many different, like you said, we have to plan for this stage of our life accordingly and learn things we didn't know. And we're not gonna know until we get into those things.
Right, right. And surprise in money is usually not good. So try to eliminate the surprises and just find out what you need to do. Yeah.
If people would like to connect with you, learn more about you, where would they go?
They can reach me through my website. So it's bridgingdivorcesolutions.com, or Facebook is Bridging Divorce, LinkedIn. But the website's probably the easiest way.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll include everything in episode notes. Thank you for what you do. And you bring your personal things into that because you went through this and now you want to help others not having to be faced with those mistakes or surprises rather.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think there are a lot of us who are in that same space. Like, oh, we can make this better, and we can. I think if we all stop settling for divorce and the outfall or the aftermath being as bad as it is, we can make it better. Like no one is like, goody, I get to get divorced. I have not encountered that. But we can make the process not so bad and more understandable and less expensive and less damaging, all the things. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
thank you.